Okay, everybody. I'd like to welcome you and I'd like you to meet Yvette Davila Richards. She's a freelance national assignment editor at Fox News Channel, where she researches and approves stories of national interest from HQ's nationwide affiliate stations. Davila Richards is the current Secretary Treasurer of the Society of Professional Journalists, SPJ, the second ever Latina elected to this position in its 100 plus year history. She's the vice chair of SPJ's Diversity and Inclusion Committee and a past SPJ Dory Maynard Diversity Fellow. She is also on the executive board of directors for its local New York City chapter, the Deadline Club. Yvette has a twin sister, 5 brothers, and a millennial daughter pursuing a physical therapy degree. Mentoring, networking, storytelling, Zooming with friends, along with drinking lots of coffee are her passions. And you can connect with her on social media, and I'll put these links in the chat. On Twitter, it's at ID Richards. And LinkedIn, I'm not going to read out that whole link. I'll just put it in the chat. So everybody, please welcome Yvette Davila Richards.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here with you today to discuss how social media plays a role in storytelling and reporting, what type of tool, how that tool can benefit you all, and how it served me in my current role in working in television. Um, Please, if you have any questions as I'm speaking, I'll be more than happy to stop and answer them because I tend to go on and on when I'm talking about a topic I'm really interested in, which is my job. So with that being said, I'll just speak a little bit about how I got into the industry, which was a couple of years ago. I want to say like actually a little bit more than that, 20 years ago. I've been in the industry now at least 20 years. I began as a news assistant at New York One News, which is now Spectrum, Spectrum One. And with that, I got a crash course training in how to operate cameras, how to go out on the field, how to conduct interviews with local police, educators. I had every beat you can think of, from the crime beat, education, entertainment, sports. Um, and then it's good when you express an interest in what you really want to do, because then they tend to place you in those. I liked everything, more so education, since I had a little young girl at the time. And so then I covered the education beat a lot, but I learned how to think on my feet about asking questions, doing research ahead of time. And I learned how to shoot video on those big cameras. You see the camera crews out on the field, when you see them out on the streets, when you see the news trucks. I was one of those women actually operating those cameras. Until then, I insisted on being able to take the smaller cameras because those are really heavy, and setting up my tripod and going to every borough in New York City. Literally, they would give us a car for us to drive to every borough and report on a story that was assigned to us. Um, there, I then went to the History Channel and worked in the sales department. Great job, paid me really well, but I found out I did not love it. You know, some people say, no, I don't like it, I love it. I did not love it. I missed being out on the field. I missed interacting with people. I missed hearing people's stories. I missed connecting. And also, since I'm bilingual, I speak fluently in Spanish. I used to be able to translate on the spot whenever they needed Spanish sound. So if anyone here speaks a different language, make sure to know to utilize that. That's a great asset that can bring you and take you far. Um, from there, since I miss being out on the field, I didn't get back into television for a while. I decided to go into teaching and became a substitute teacher here in the New York City's elementary schools, and really enjoyed that for a while. Being the Spanish teacher and being called Mrs. Richards, you know, and the theater background in me also like came into play during story time. And I would really enact the story that I would tell the children. So suffice it to say, whatever fields you get into, um, work really hard at it. Make sure you're good at it because it will always translate to the next position that you may get into. Um, After that, I worked at the Catholic Television Network as a robotic camera operator, and would also mic up the people, the guests that will come on our show. Um, and then that entailed going to a lot of mass. So I went to church every day with that job because I had to record the mass at different churches throughout New York City. And that was interesting. I'm a Christian, but I got to learn a lot about the Catholic religion and all the steps that they do while the service is going on and when the music is playing, how that needs to be recorded. So that was a really good education into how just a whole Catholic television network, you know. Um, and then from that, I took some time off, and then I got hired at CBS News, where I was an associate producer for a number of years, and that was at the network. And there I learned a lot. That's where I also decided to help formulate the diversity calling that I had to make sure that my black and brown brothers and sisters at the station would mentor students um, and let them know how they can get into the field. And so the employee resource groups that I helped create at CBS um, shaped a lot as to how the programming was done with local organizations such as the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, uh, the National Association of Black Journalists, Asian Journalists. Those are great organizations for you guys and ladies to join because they help shape you in terms of you get a lot of mentoring, you get a lot of feedback, you also get job opportunities, internship opportunities across the country with various outlets, not just in television, but in local newspapers, on the digital side, audience engagement now. Um, you name it, anything that has to deal with communications, those organizations are a great thing to be a part of. I've been a board member with NHJ for many years, and now I'm a board member with SPJ, which is the Society of Professional Journalists. Um, and like with any other journalist, sometimes there's restructuring. I was laid off from CBS News after 10 and a half years. And there I decided to take a break because, yeah, it's always a shock to the system when that happens. And that's something that we all need to be aware of because it can happen to you. It may not be your fault. A lot of people think, oh, I did something wrong um, or I wasn't good enough. No, it's not that at all. It's also the fact that they decide to restructure and there's no money in the budget to keep a department running. They decide to strip that budget, which is what happened in my case, and my department was eliminated, and everyone was let go. We were given severance packages and all that good stuff, but the fact remains you don't have a job, right? So other people took jobs at other organizations. I decided to take a break. I went traveling for a few months just to regroup and then decided to just take courses in things that always interested me. I started doing photography for friends, for events that they had. So again, I go back to there's a skill that you have, a good hobby, develop it because it can become a business asset for you as well. And financially, it could benefit you. I did that for about a year. And then I was hired at Fox News headquarters as an assignment editor. And that was my going back into news, being in house, not outside on the field. And I've been there 3 years now. So it's an assignment editor. We deal with breaking news all the time. We deal with fact checking of that breaking news to ensure that it's actually factual, that it's not just a post that someone put up on Twitter. We use this platform called Data Miner, and that is an aggregation of all the tweets that people put out throughout the region. So it could be Midwest, Southwest, which is the region that I cover. It could be the Northeast, Southeast, or the West. And so a lot of the times, well, most of the time, it's not just viewers that tweet and then that source aggregates them, but they also aggregate um, tweets by local officials or the fire department or the police department on let's say there's a fire or there's been a kidnapping or whatever the story may be. And so those come out in real time and they're like constant, constant, constant. And so within my role as an assignment editor with my with Southeast region, I have to ascertain if that's actually a story. I make phone calls to our local affiliates in Minnesota, in Tennessee, or in Chicago to make sure if the station has a heads up as to what's going on, and then they make some calls. I make calls also to the local fire department or police department, depending what the story is, to make sure that then we get those wheels turning if a story is worthy. Um, a story that always gets traction is officer involved shootings, unfortunately. So that always gets major play. It's like drop everything. We got to investigate if the officer's hurt. What's the location? If there's photogs being sent to the scene, we try to get a quote from the police department or the fire department, the sheriff. Um, and so we try to keep track of that because then if there's scene video that we can get live, um, we book satellite feeds for that to make sure that that's transmitted simultaneously to us once that's they're there. Um, and so it's interesting. Some days are nothing's happening, and then the next hour it'll just blow up, and you're like having to be like guns blazing, making sure you're making all your beat calls, making sure you're verifying information. We also use another tool called Broadcastify, which is another medium where you can hear the local officials, more so like the police or fire that's on scene of an incident, discussing in real time what's going on. So that's really helpful. So there's a lot of tools that we use to make sure that our stories are brought to us and we get the actual information. Um, but let me see, anything else we thought we can discuss here? Because I could go on. Go on. Any other, any questions you guys may have? Okay. Well, I put up a question on Facebook and Twitter to ask my colleagues what feedback I can provide to you all on how to utilize social media and also what role does social media play in storytelling. And I was given a lot of good quotes. I was asked to let you guys know to always verify. So not just share. If you see a story on Facebook or Twitter or on Snapchat or TikTok, verify the authenticity. Verify if it's not just something that someone shared to you. Check the location if you can. Like you got to really investigate. And a lot of people tend to be lazy and they don't do that. But check the date, check if that's a credible news source and not just an opinion that someone's giving, because not people tend to think that that opinion is factual, is gold, and it's not. You know, when we see now there's a lot of misinformation that's spread on social media and people take that at face value and then they go to bat, you know, arguing like, well, this is what this is being said, and so I believe it. But check if it's by a credible news source. Check if they've done more reporting. Just take a little time, an extra 5 minutes to double check that, because there's a lot of people who put fake information on social media, and unfortunately the layman person, you know, the next person, it's not going to take the time because frankly they don't have the time. They just read it on their mobile platform, whether it be their tablet or their phone, and they think, oh, this is what happened to you. Well, that's the truth. But no, try to do a little digging to make sure that what you're reading is actually factual, so that you are not just a concerned citizen but an informed citizen. Excuse me. Let me see here. Techniques to verify if what they read on social media is news. Well, like I mentioned before, through data miner, I go the extra step of calling like the sheriff, the local police. If there's a mall shooting, I call the mall police to try to get a statement. Usually, with police here, we get a PIO, a public information officer, that we try to get on hand to give us some information about what's going on, and then that way we could tell our reporter the PIO gave this information, and they can report that out on their live shot to the viewers when they're watching the newscast. So that's another way to go about it. Working in news definitely has its highs and lows. Like I mentioned, it's could be really busy. There's some days there's just local news where we have our reporters that pitch their stories, and it's up to the manager, the assistant news director, or the EP to decide whether they'll take that story, and they have to then research more on it. And it's also the job of the assignment editor to help that reporter with whatever elements they may need, whether it be video or extra sound bites, if they can call up people or see if they can get material that's archived to make their story look good once it's put on air. Unless it's breaking news that you're there live, you go with what's live, with the elements that are there. But if you're working on a piece that'll be put up like in a day or two, you have some time to get B-roll material, and sound bites and any other expert source, or studies that you can allude to in your piece. So, any questions? Any questions anyone may have as to what makes them want to get into journalism?
I've got a question. When you're reporting, um, and you're having to communicate with all of these different organizations, police and whatnot, um, what's hardest about communicating with them? Like, do you get a lot of pushback sometimes?
Oh yes,
All you?
oh yes. So the other day I had a officer involved shooting, and it was actually at a correctional facility that was up in arms, and they actually took hostage one of the correction officers. And what turned out was that they took the correction officer's phone and started broadcasting live the eruption that was happening. So I immediately contacted the correctional facility to try to get someone to talk. There's usually a public information officer, but no one wanted to speak to me. They literally just said, "We don't have time to speak," and they hung up the phone on me. And I was like, "Wait a minute, what?" And then I thought, okay, it's breaking news. Let me call back a few minutes later to see, because usually there's a public information officer on hand. There should be one. Um, some places don't have it, or if it's after hours, you leave a message and someone calls you back. Um, but yeah, I did get pushback where I called 3 times and they wouldn't give any statement. And then when I contacted the local station, they had gotten a statement from the local PIO. So I said, well, okay, well, at least they got it because they're going live on air with that. And then Facebook shut down the Lifebook feed that was going on because it was, it was is what's the word? It was concerning. It was you didn't know if anything really bad was going to happen to that officer, even though they had him handcuffed, but you didn't know if something else was going to happen. So yeah, we do get pushback. There are some PIOs who are welcome to talk, and they're like anything else, or they'll call back right away if you leave a message, and they give you a statement and they say call back anytime. But we do encounter that, and you have to have thick skin to not get offended. I at first was like, "What? How dare they?" But then I thought, okay, they're dealing with breaking news; they don't have time to talk. But at least what I've encountered in the Northeast states, PIOs are always on hand, whether it be in the breaking hours of the day, early hours of the day, or late at night. there's always someone on call because anything can happen. And so they know that the media needs that information to be able to tell the story. And if they want the story to be told properly, they need to be available and give that information. Yeah. So yeah, and a lot of the times it could be nerve-wracking, right? When you're trying to fact check all the information and you have to do this like yesterday, because you want that reporter to go live with information. And when I mentioned you have to have thick skin, and just realize, not just thick skin, but realize that everyone's under pressure to get that story out right away, but it needs to be factual. So even though they're rushing you, they also know they can't super rush you because you need to get the facts of what's going on, because you rather be accurate than mistaken when you then report something that's not true. Um, but it could be nerve wracking a bit when you're under the gun, um, calling and not getting any feedback, or and then you try the next source, or if you see someone posted something on Twitter, you try to get that person to talk to you and actually tell you the kind of information of what's going on, and you have to check, is it really that person, and where are they, and are they near the scene? So you have to check for all of that to make sure that you're speaking to someone credible as well. But those are split decisions that you make as you hear them speak, or if they write to you on Twitter personally or on Facebook. We always say we want to give attribution to the person. We ask permission. That's a big thing too. You want to always get permission to give get their statement and put it out, because you don't want to be sued. Also, we ask for permission of video that people might post on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Um, you have to always get permission, because if not, you'll be liable for a lawsuit. But we always ask them, we let them know as well if their permission is good for all of our platforms. So not just our affiliates or our .com, our online, all of the shows that we have here in New York and throughout the country. So we always make sure we give them that notice so that they're aware. And if some want a fee, we discuss a fee to pay them. So a thing that gets a lot of money, and I still can't wrap my head around it, is dog videos, puppy videos, bear videos. People just resonate with those videos, and news stations pay a lot of money for that. And I'm just like, wait a minute, what? But so the feel good story. But yeah, some stringers, like they call them, have gotten paid 500, 1,000, sometimes more, depending on how good the video is, or where they were at and what the animal was doing. Um, and per se, other video that they may get of a scene that there's no other news station that's there, but they got it, and they got it really clear and sharp. We negotiate a fee to get it, and it'll be exclusive to us, not to anyone else. Um, and there's some stringers who know how to work it and know how to negotiate. Well, they'll get 100 from Fox, 100 from ABC, CBS, so they know how to work it and negotiate that angle so that they can get paid. So that's another field that a lot of post uh, news people get into, where they work for themselves, but they're credible because they were a journalist before, and so they're a stringer. So they'll cover tornadoes. That also gets a lot of money. Um, those people that cover tornadoes, because that's also fracking. It's also a situation that they put themselves in that's actually scary, but they get good video. So yeah.
I'd remind everybody, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat if you don't want to speak up, and I can ask it. Um, I was interested in getting your opinion on this.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we know that journalism is often called the fourth estate. Um, and when I was working on my master's degree in journalism at Kent State, in our classes, we talked a lot about the rise of what they're dubbing the fifth estate, which is, of course, just your every man on the street armed with uh, a
A
cell phone.
phone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, what do you think that impact is going to be when anybody now has the power to um, record events and publish? Do you think is that a good thing or a bad thing for journalism?
Um, it's become the norm. So look at TMZ. They began on the street recording videos of entertainers and celebrities and actors and actresses and started selling it to news stations because they were always there at airports, at cafes. And then now they transitioned to being like number one first on the scene. And so TMZ transitioned to not just covering celebrities, athletes, entertainers, to now actual stories where they're the first ones there because they hire so many people to be everywhere and capture that video. So it has, I feel, set back journalism a bit because look, we went to school, we paid. I mean, some of us got scholarships and grants, but a lot of us had to pay through loans that we took out and when we pay for our educations. And some people have just become really good at using their phones and taking really good videos. And I feel they've studied what journalists do in a way behind the scenes because some have gotten so good at asking questions, at shooting really good B-roll, and then calling up news stations saying, "Hey, I have this." They'll pitch a story and they'll provide the video. And again, it can't be put on air if we don't have their permission. Some who did in the past ended up getting sued and having to settle. And so, because of that's why a lot of stations now have to get their permission. But yeah, now it's a thing where on YouTube people have become millionaires, if you will, because they learn how to use their phones, all the features that an iPhone or Android offers, with the filters, with the white balancing, um, to actually record and get good videos. So even though it might have been something that hit journalism on the head, now it's one where it's in alignment to, if you will, because a lot of people now provide news stations with really good information, especially if they're low on resources. And now during COVID, especially, the majority of people are working from home. So we have a lot of the producers, assignment editors are working from home, but they have the tools on their laptop to be able to see things and operate like if you were in the newsroom. I'm having to do that this week for the first time, and it's taken me a little bit to adapt because I like being in the newsroom. I like, even though there will be only two or three people, but I like being there. I have all these big screens that I can watch all our feeds. I can make a phone call to the satellite desk, the bookings, um, or go to the cafeteria. You know what I mean? You get that sense of normalcy when you're in the newsroom as opposed to working from home and where you sleep, where you eat, to also not having to work. But we've had to adapt to that. But to finally answer your question on that, it's become one and one with. I mean, it's not taking over actual journalists, but it's something that we also look to. So let's see. Sometimes we say if there's any stringer material that we can purchase because we didn't have photographers able to get to the scene, and if they actually pitch us bef- like right when the story is happening, I get so many emails of stringers that are on site of a crime scene or the tornado mass where all the homes are destroyed, and they're sending us pictures of things that our own photographers haven't gotten there yet too. So it's a profit. It's become a profit, and one that people, because they want that profit, are getting really good at making sure they provide us with what we need. Yeah.
Very cool. I think I've got my last question for you. Um, what's your best day on the job? You can either give me an ideal situation, or if you can think about a day that you were like, today was a great day.
For me, and it's funny because breaking news is par for the course, but it always still unnerves me a bit because you have to like be on. So for me, a great day is when I'm able to make all my bookings, and by that I mean like we get our daily press governor or governor briefings, so we know we have to book those ahead of time. We know we're getting now the Derek Chauvin trial in Minneapolis. We know that ahead of time we have to book all those feeds and make sure that our reporters on site, our photographers from the affiliates are there, and we have contracts with other stations. We make sure that all that is preset. I'm really good personally with pre-planning and organizing. I always try to think of what else could happen. So you have to prepare for that as well because not everything's going to be seamless and perfect. But a good day for me is when all my bookings have come to fruition. The feeds come in well, the press conferences are well. And if we hear something that may be breaking news coming out of that press briefing, I alert our manager right away. I also let the station know, hey, did you happen to catch this? And so we get to working on that to make sure that we formulate a story. But yeah, that for me is a good day. And also when the PIOs speak to me and give me the information we need so that I can tell our reporters and not get pushback or not get hung up on, which that happens a lot as well. So yeah.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Well, do we have any?
We
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, we once had to file a Freedom of Information Act request just to get a mugshot for a teacher that had been arrested because they
Wow.
didn't feel like that the high school press was legitimate press.
Wow. And that's so wrong because there's been cases where journalists out of high schools have broken stories,
Oh, yeah.
many, and have gotten already small contracts going into college like, hey, you can freelance for us because they've noticed how good their stories were in the local newspaper or local TV. So yeah, the key thing that I told high school journalism students is to like stay par for the course, like research, study, know everything about, get to know at least a little bit about all the subjects, both national and international. I just participated in this Pointer Producers Program, and one of the guests was the local one of the sponsors from CNN, Ramon Escobar, and he hires for CNN producers, reporters, you name it, and he gives everyone that he interviews a test. And in that test, which I've taken it, and I'm like, oh man, it makes you think. He asks roundabout questions of, well, who is the president, and he names the Latin American country, or in Europe another country, or what was the breaking news coming out of Guatemala last week that made headlines. So you have to be well versed, excuse me, in all news. You may not have to know all the details, but know what's going on, not only in your local community, because one of the other questions was like, what happened last week in New York City with the mayor and the education department? They'll zone in on little things, and I used to think, wow, well, that's kind of unfair because how are you gonna know that one story? But at least, let's say out of 10 questions, if you get none of them right, it's a plus for you. But if you get just five, they're like, so be well versed in politics, education, in politics, again, both national and international, the basics of what's going on. Read many sources, whether it be the Associated Press, the New York Times, or foreign press. Also, the stories in your local community, your local newspapers, know what's going on. Who are your local senators, your governors, even as far as your judges, because now with this political season that just transpired, knowing who the judges were also set the tone. What rules were they calling for? So those are things that are important to know. And then of course, getting well trained on the beat you want to eventually cover moving forward as you progress in your journalism career. But knowing a little bit about what's going on in the world, both national and international, help you become more well-rounded to be that candidate that get tired, because just having an interview and you knowing those topics could be the deciding factor for that news director or assistant news director. So, yeah. Well,
All right.
I hope I answered everyone's questions or doubts. I mean, feel free to connect with me on social media. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Yvette. We really appreciate you taking your time out of what I'm sure is a very busy day for you.
Yeah.
You probably never have a day that's not busy. So
when I get my off days, I cherish them. Trust me. I sleep in. I sleep in.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but I just want to thank you again, and I'll go ahead and end the session.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.